This is my winter beater. It is a 2006 X5 with the 4.4, so that makes it the N62 and the last year of the E53 X5. This one has done, 240,000 miles. There's two considered kind of like problematic engines in the X5, and this is debatably the worst of them. This particular engine currently, when you start it up cold, does not use all of its cylinders. And then under load, it also does not utilize all of the cylinders. It could be as simple as just kind of worn plugs. It has 240,000 miles, who knows when they were serviced last. I'm gonna do all that stuff anyway. Doesn't seem like a coil, it's not a dead skip, it's just under load. So that'll take a little diagnostic work to find. But we're gonna start with all the usual tune-up stuff, filters, plugs, that type of deal, and go from there. E53s in general are kind of known for door handle issues. This one does not do the door handle. You can tell it's kind of something's up here. It doesn't fit quite right anyway, so something's going on inside. We'll have to figure that out once we pull the door panel. Also, this window doesn't work because these things go through window regulators like crazy. This one just makes a heck of a racket and doesn't move. The driver's one is making noises like it's an inch from death, but it does function. So I bet I'll have to do both of those too. The interior is disgusting. I was told that's ice cream. It might be. Pretty much everywhere is just kind of gross. I don't know if there's little kids in here forever or what, but like this is jammed, and I think it's probably just stuck with soda or ice cream or goo, or it's broken, but it seems to, like, it doesn't even want to move. But everything is kind of optioned out. This has like, heated rear seats, heated front seats, which I'm excited about because I've only ever had one car with heated seats. It's got a heated wheel, never had that before. This is also the newest car I've ever owned by 6 years. So really stepping up the game here. Step one for me is gonna be cleaning it inside and out and trying to get everything back to a good starting point because I can't deal with this.
Well, what progress have we made?
So I've done the plugs. That didn't fix the misfire. Fired up again, poked around on some stuff, thought the PCB was an issue, so I bypassed that. And it seemed to change stuff, but not enough. And I found a loose plug where the injectors plug into like the main harness.
Well, this was in the process of...
Yeah, I was swapping coils because it was misfiring on us. Cylinder 6 was the most consistent, the highest misfire on the rough running thing. Swapped that with number 2, and then I was looking at it, I'm like, loose. So I gave it a little push and it snapped in, and now it's fine.
Like driver's bank.
Fixed, seems like. Boosters are out. I'm gonna show you the problem with the boosters, I guess. So the vacuum pumps on these shit boxes, I can't say that.
Yeah, you can. Keep it in.
These junk things. The vacuum pump kind of spits oil into the tube, and then if this check valve is bad, it fills the booster with oil, which eats the diaphragm. So if you can, I don't know if you can see that, this one is sticky. This one from the motor, not the same motor, is nice and clean, although minorly rusty, which is a concern. And this one's all gooey and nasty from eating oil the whole time. So hopefully this fixes it. Hopefully this junkyard one is good. I'm going to swap to a different check valve and probably add a couple more of them before deciding if I should change the vacuum pump. They're just expensive. So for right now, I don't want to. All right, so the booster's back in. I fired it up, put the underdash back together. pushing the pedal. I've got great assist now, which is awesome. But the pedal was a little squishy, and it's just pouring brake fluid out the bottom. So now that it has sufficient brake pressure, it was enough to blow a rusty line. Luckily, there's a union here. This is the source of the leak, where it's nice and fluffy inside this bulkhead here. Makes sense, so it's holding moisture. As you might notice, this curlicue here is not a factory BMW situation. So someone's done one line, they didn't do the other. And they did a, quite frankly, terrible job of doing this line. Because neither are back in this connector. It kind of just does some whip-de-wops down here, up and around, and then none of it's in its correct clips and stuff up here. This is NICOP, which doesn't rust and is softer. So it turns green like the Statue of Liberty and stops. This is a brake line flare tool. So hopefully this works enough to show you what's going on. Now I just put the bubble flare in for BMW. All right, so as you can see, I put bigger tires on the X5. These are 32-inch Kenda cleaver, who knows? MTs, but they look awesome. Kendas have been awesome. We use them on all the drift cars, so I'm a big fan. I kind of dig it. It looks pretty good. Hopefully, the real video guys can get nice footage of it instead of me walking around with a GoPro like a dink. We're developing lift kits for X5s. So this is the prototype, well, somewhat the prototype that I've designed. The rear is about how it would sit. The front is currently sitting a little lower because I couldn't run one of the prototype things we were doing just because it was 3D printed and I don't want to die. Still runs like crap. I've done nothing about that. I still have to do the valve cover gaskets because those are leaking like crazy. So I put tires on it. I was coming down the highway and it started losing power and it started losing useful RPMs. So, I was kind of nursing it down the end of the ramp and I was hoping to just pull into that gas station and it died completely at that light in the middle in everybody's way. So, it's been a great morning. I think the fuel pump died. That's kind of my suspicion. I've been suspect of it for a little bit. Going pressure.
Very minimal amount of pressure. And no liquid.
No liquid?
No liquid.
This is the dangerous way to check for fuel pressure. So there's two fuel rails there. There's a little Schrader valve like on your tire, just right in the top of the fuel rail. So we're just depressing the Schrader valve to see if it's pressure. If you had good fuel pressure and we didn't suspect it being bad like this, that'd be a dangerous thing to do because you'd be spraying hot fuel all over the engine bay. But since it died, and I'm pretty sure it's a fuel pump,
Mike
and
was
it's not spraying fuel.
in his guess.
Yeah, I'm pretty confident
And
at
also
putting Will at risk in this situation. So yeah, there's two covers on the fuel tank because there's a drive shaft hump in the middle. So there's usually a sender on both sides, and the fuel pump is on one. Actually, which would make a lot of sense as to what's going on here. But if you're curious which side the fuel pump is on, I happen to know it's on the passenger side on these, but if you look at the wires, there's two big fellas here on this one. The fuel pumps can be much higher amperage than just sending units, which are these two little fellas. So that one only has little fellas, this one has big fellas. The other thing that would make a lot of sense, so there's a suction tube, a Venturi suction tube. So the return line from the pressure regulator dumps back into the opposite side of the tank as the pump. It's got a little Venturi suction pump in there, so the pressure coming in creates suction to pull from that side of the tank and fill the side of the tank with the fuel pump. So if that's bad, it'll never transfer from one side of the tank to the other. So it can read like it has a quarter of a tank, but this side of the tank could be completely dry, and it could be out of gas on one side. So this is the pump. This is the level sender. Which looks okay. But that doesn't mean anything. There's no gas in there.
So now, is it just, you think that there's gas on the other side, it's not pumping through that?
Yeah, I'll check that as well. I have a meeting right now though. All right, new fuel filter in hand. I'm about to swap this thing out. There's a million bolts in this cover, all of which were rusty. So fought that all out and dropped it. I'm hoping to not pull it out because like the exhaust is kind of in the way. And it goes up above the subframe, but I have enough space to do this now. Yeah, it's funny because this is one of those things I would normally change, but normally I buy stuff that doesn't work. This already worked. I'm like, I've always changed the fuel filters and it never makes a difference. I'll do it when it doesn't work or something. Didn't work right off the bat. So, you can see these things like leak and death. Hopefully this is the whole issue with the fuel pressure, because the regulator is internal. That's what the little port here is the reference line that goes up to the motor. So, yeah. And then there's return. You can't see that. We're in the dark. It says right on it. Return, and then in the motor. Fuel filter changed. As you can see, the black death coming out of there. This hasn't been changed in a very long time, if ever. So, that was a problem. Unfortunately, I put the fuel pressure gauge on it, and we still have low pressure. So, looks like the pump has been hurt pumping all of that dirt. I have to get a new pump. Not a big deal, but it was worth changing the filter first. So I'm going to do a trans service on the X5. So one good thing to keep in mind, especially if your car is from anywhere rusty like this one was, is make sure you can get both your drain and fill plug loose before you do anything. Because if one of them is stripped out or you have to drill it out or something like that, sometimes it's cheaper to just buy a new pan. So before you get in too deep, I mean obviously it's easier to loosen them when the pan's bolted up, but on top of that, in case you have something messed up with it, your car's not down while you're waiting for a pan after you just dug into it and then you can't get fluid back in or something. So I pulled both of those, they came out fine. Waiting for this to drain, and then I'm gonna pull the pan and do a new filter. And the gasket for the pan, and then new red line fluid. So here we go. Alright, so I got the pan down. Magnets are nice and clean. Fluid is gross, but I mean, this thing has 242,000 miles on it now. So, who knows when it was serviced last. I kind of just cleaned up the gasket surface here, pulled the old filter down, which I'm going to look at. I'm going to make sure I get the seal out so that I can put a new one in. Just got to pick that guy out of there. But, yeah, as simple as putting the new filter in, put the pan back on with the new gasket, and start adding fluid, and then I gotta get up to temp to check final fluid levels. But So in addition to doing the transmission service, I've been getting a code for temperature. I don't remember. I've been getting a code for thermostat stuck open, so it's not getting up to temperature, at least fast enough. So since it's a winter car, I decided to do a thermostat, just stock temperature. I'm not lowering it because I want the heat to be awesome. So I'm starting to dig into that now before I get it up to temp to check the transmission fluid, because that's all back together other than checking the fluid level. So I'm working on that now. Got these plastic clampy fellows here, which I just sprayed with PB pretty good, because these can be pretty stubborn, and these little plastic connectors, as they get old, tend to grenade. So just kind of, I like to just wiggle them, and then I'll get a screwdriver in between and kind of just put a little load on it to push it that way while I wiggle it and just let it come out. But a little penetrant gets the O-ring to move. So finesse that off like so. Didn't even need the screwdriver. But yeah, just a little spray lube in there to get the O-ring to move, because these can really stick on there. And if you really reef on them, you'll just shatter the plastic doohickey. So I'm going to put a drain pan under that before I make a tremendous mess. And then hopefully quickly swap that guy out. Although I did find some signs of a coolant leak coming from the bell housing, which is either the dreaded coolant tube that these all had a problem with, or valley pan or anything else under the intake, because there's drains in the back of the valley of the engine, and those drain into the bell housing. So that's cool. Not dealing with it right now, but future project. This is my X5 winter beater. It looks better now because wheels and tires change everything. Fixed a lot of things, and there's still quite a few things broken. But for right now, it's a running, driving vehicle. Currently, it has a 1-inch lift. It's currently on 32-inch Kenda tires and some motors I had in my basement. I spent $1,200 on it. I have more than that into it now, not including the tires. So I'm not surprised in that. Like, you can't really get one that works well for less than $3 grand. So buying one that's broken, I'm still making out okay. I feel a little more comfortable buying something this cheap that's completely broken and going through it all myself and knowing what condition it's in versus a $3,000 example that might be a minute from failure on a couple other parts. As far as an off-road thing, I expected this to behave like very open diff oriented. So like if you start to hang a tire or the other tires are stuffed or something like that, it just kind of spin that one wheel and you get stuck. It's surprisingly good at modulating the brakes and kind of keeping all the tires on the ground. The four-wheel drive system works pretty decently with these tires on it. It seems to be going where I point it for the most part. It rides decent. So kind of doing some mild trails with the comforts of, you know, having a nice interior and heated seats and like panoramic sunroof to look at the outdoors while you're there. It's not bad. I'm under no illusion that it's this killer off-road rock crawler or mud buggy thing or whatever. It's just as a daily drivable thing that you could drive off the side of the road into some dirt and play around. It's not bad. I think everyone's pretty well aware that like X5s in general are maintenance intensive. So buying a cheap one means you're gonna have to fix everything, and they have tons of known problems, and you're probably gonna have to look into all that. But if you're prepared for it, you can still find a pretty cheap example in decent shape that needs a bunch of work and come out ahead. I'm very impressed. I mean, I was trying very dumb things, and it did most of it. So you have to keep pushing the limits till you find it, and sliding into this rut, found it.